Today we're going to talk a little bit about the ISS program and what we're doing, what changes we're making to help the users on board the International Space Station operate better, operate quicker, get the results sooner, and change some of the things that NASA has done in the past. And we're also looking to talk to the new users as well, show you what we're doing, and help you move along in this path. Next chart, please. So, I think that's the last, towards the end. Let's try this again. I'll keep talking and we'll get the charts up. All right, there we go. So, we spent the first 10 years, you've heard this many times this week as well as in the past, building the space station. And a few years ago, we went and updated our vision statement and our mission statement. And we changed it from an assembly approach to a commercialization, a research and utilization approach, looking at what we have, what we've built, and now how we're going to use it. And one of the things we're doing in the program is to continuously go back to the ISS vision, the ISS mission, and make sure what we're doing today, the changes we're making, are supportive of this. Next chart. So, what are we doing? What are we doing to meet the needs of the customer? And so in the past, we've had a NASA that would have an approach to customers flying on the International Space Station or on the Space Shuttle at that time, and you would be working to our requirements, and it would take you longer to get the flight. What we're trying to do is now work to your requirements. You as a customer, tell us what you need. What do you want to fly, you don't want to fly, or design and build and test, and then fly in 7 years. You want to have a concept and you want to fly it in 6 months, 8 months. We want to change to move to your pace. Tell us what you need to get us there. Next chart. So, we've created a national lab where 50% of the resources, 50% of the International Space Station resources are national lab related. National lab meaning we can't touch that as a government, as a NASA government. So up mass, crew time, down mass, power, data requirements, whatever you need, 50% is carved out when we're designing an expedition for the national lab. And when we first started this concept and we were working on the national lab was not using 50%. So NASA as a customer, we were kind of going over the 50% on our side. Well, we've come to a time now where the national lab is using greater than 50%. So they're at a point where they're exceeding that number and they're going to have to they are prioritizing to get us back. NASA, on the other hand, is prioritizing as well. And one of the things we've been looking at is it doesn't make sense for NASA to do research, national lab to do research, and to have those parallel research paths going on. Rodents is a prime example where, the government has a need to do rodent research. The commercial sector has a need to rodent research. Could we work together and combine those research, that activity, such that we're doing one set of research and we're sharing among the different partners? So instead of going on a parallel path, we're working together. And by that, each customer, the commercial side, the government side, are all getting more than what they would do if they were working separately. The other thing we're learning is the commercial users out there, they have different needs than the traditional NASA user. And so what you see over time is that if we're asking you, if old NASA is saying, hey, you need to do this, this, and this, and it takes you 5 years to fly, 7 years to fly, as a commercial user, your competition has moved on. And if we're holding you guys back, we're not doing you any favors, and you can't survive. So we're looking to tell us, we're going to ask you, does this thing, payload, activity, whatever you want to do, does it damage the crew? Does it damage the space station? If the answer to that is no, we're good to go. And we're in the past where NASA would push a lot of requirements down on the different users. We're giving up on those, and we'll talk a little more as we go through the charts. Next chart.
Designated the ISS as a national lab really created significant new opportunities for non-exploration research that was oriented at really terrestrial or Earth-based applications. In other words, most of the research prior to the national lab designation was focused on NASA problems. How do you support astronauts in their health and fitness for long duration missions? But the National Lab was really allowing other users to come in, commercial, academic, foundations, etc., to use the significant resources on the space station to conduct research that would help them in their missions here on Earth.
And so who are our customers? And so you see a handful listed there. Our goal is to tell you that these are our new customers, people we want on board the International Space Station. Our goal is to increase this. I'd like to come back at this conference next year or our next meeting and double this number. And so we're looking for everybody out there who wants to fly on the International Space Station. Tell us what you need. Is there a barrier out there that we're not addressing? If we don't know it, we can't fix it. So we really need your help in doing that. Next chart. I think we have another video.
The ISS is a platform that enables us to launch a lot of satellites together, and there's really regular launch opportunities to the International Space Station. So it enabled us to iterate the technology fast. So it enabled us to launch our first fleet and iterate the technology quickly. And then finally, it also enabled us to spread the satellites out, because we could release them, say, in the case of how we do it 2 at a time, and then wait 12 hours, and then another 2. And that's great because that helps us to spread the satellites out around the orbit so that they can take pictures of different parts of the planet, which is, of course, we need to do.
We're trying to grow protein crystals on the International Space Station, and the belief is that under the microgravity environment, we could grow bigger crystals. And we're growing large volume crystals for neutron crystallography. And what that means is that we're using diffraction techniques of neutrons to decipher the definitive location of hydrogen atoms. And this is very important to know where hydrogen atoms are for any drug design or for any bioengineering of particular enzymes.
So we're seeing new customers, as most of you are aware, flying the International Space Station, doing things that we didn't normally do as a NASA. And so how are we meeting your goals and how are we meeting the payload customer goals? I said earlier, tell us when you're ready to fly. In the past, we would say you're on SpaceX 15, you're on Orbital 10, and you would work to that date and missions would slip. We're changing that. You tell us, I'm ready to go in January 17, we'll go find you a ride. You're not gonna be pinned to a mission anymore. Just give us your requirements. We'll tell you the different capabilities of the vehicles, what capabilities, as far as up mass, down mass, powered, et cetera, et cetera. But tell us what you need, we'll go do that. Mission success. So I said, we're gonna ask you, tell us it doesn't harm the crew, tell us it doesn't harm the vehicle, and then NASA's gonna back off on mission success. This doesn't mean we don't think mission success is important. We know mission success is important to you. What we do know is all our requirements that are driving you for cost, for time, for resources, we don't need to continue to impose that. You, as a customer, need to decide what you want. We're there to help you, tell you, we can guide you, but as far as mission success requirements, that is going to be on the customer, and we'll guide you through the process, but you decide how much time, how much money you want to spend. For example, if you're spending, and we'll say old NASA again, you're spending 5 years to get something ready to fly, and you have a simple failure on orbit that brings you down, and so 5 years later, you now found that simple failure. Well, if we're moving at your pace, and maybe we don't do all that testing, you fly in 6 or 7 months, you come back down, we bring down the hardware, you fix it, you fly again, and another 6 or 7 months or even sooner, and then now you've done something in a year, year and a half, maybe 2 years that you've done, that you waited 5 years for, and you got a better product, you got a stronger product. Consolidating and pacing data requests from the different customers. So, old NASA again, we'd ask you for all this information. If one company, one part of NASA needed something in metric, we'd ask you for a metric. If we needed in English units, we'd ask you again to give it to us. Well, we don't need to do that anymore. That's wrong. It's causing you time. It's causing you effort. We're going to ask you for one set of data. If we, the NASA community, and all our different processes need data in a different format, that's our job to convert it. That's not a burden that you should have to pay. Pacing data. You don't have all the data that's necessary to fly all at one time. In the past, we've asked you to give us the best you have, and payload customers have felt kind of maybe threatened or pushed to give us data when they weren't ready. And I'll tell you, at times we didn't need all that data. So we're going to pace the data requests. We're going to tell you when we need it, we're going to tell you what we need it for, and go from there. Again, our job is to make it easier for you guys. We're redefining the payload requirements. So we had about 2,400 requirements for pressurized and unpressurized payloads flying in the International Space Station. We cut that down to 1,200, and we're continuing to look at that. I will tell you, for unpressurized, we deleted half the requirements. They were not necessary. They were, just old and again, not in a position for us to continue where we want to go with the International Space Station today. We're also looking at, if you come to us and you need help, I want to be really clear on the mission success. We're still going to provide you as much help as you want. We're not going to desert you as a customer. On the mission success, we'll sit down, explain our processes, explain why we did this, explain maybe a similar payload that flew and what they learned and what testing they had done. So we're trying to change the scope of what we're doing. Next chart. So as far as the process from conception to operate, and so you see it there again, we're going to walk you through that process. We're going to help you and explain to you the pitfalls that similar customers have fallen in before and what we've done at the NASA community to go ahead and change that. One example, other things we're looking at is reflight. So in the safety process, we're moving to a method where we categorize the payloads. You fly once on the International Space Station, you do a great job, and you get a Category 1 status. You fly again, it's like, okay, this is a Category 1 status repeating. We know they know our process. We know what they do, so we're going to reduce the requirements on them. Maybe you went through the process and you didn't get everything perfect as we'd like, and so maybe you're a Category 2. So we'll work with you. You'll have a little more requirements to do on a reflight, but our goal is to get you to a Category 1. And then maybe we have a Category 3, for brand new users just going in. But again, we're going to tailor the process to you. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all like you've seen in the past. Next chart. How are we going to meet your goals? So from, as you know, we're operating with 6 astronauts and cosmonauts on board, 3 of them dedicated to the USOS segment. We are right now operating about 40 hours of crew-tended research and science every week on average. Now that number goes up and down depending on the activities you have, whether you have a visiting vehicle or a spacewalk. But what we're doing different is when we first started, you had all these requirements, what had to be done during an expedition. You had research, you had maintenance tasks, you had EVAs, you had visiting vehicles. And what we would do in the past is you'd have visiting vehicles, maintenance, other activities. Then at the end, what you had left was utilization and research. So we've turned that around, and what we do now is we carve out a minimum of 35 hours of crew-tended research every expedition, and that's the first thing. And then the other things, visiting vehicles, spacewalks, maintenance, that comes out of the bottom half. And so again, changing a paradigm shift of how we're planning the different missions. We want to get up to a 7th crew member, and the plan is that 7th crew member or 4th USOS crew member, his time will be 100% dedicated to the research and science. And so we'll go ahead and double from the 35 hours to almost 70 hours average per week. One thing we're trying to do, that's going to be a few years before we get there. It's something that we all know it's coming, but how can we is there a way we can do something incrementally? How can we get there a little faster? And so what we've been doing is working with our Russian colleagues to have some of our Russian cosmonauts come on over and do some joint research and some joint science. Now that comes with some challenges, language challenges, some culture challenges. We're working through those. We're learning that every day, more and more. But we're starting to see an increase in the Russian cosmonauts participating in the USOS research. And why that's important is because the crew time right now is our limiting factor. And so I will tell you from the the up mass and down mass, while we may have challenges from time to time, right now, in order to get your research done, it's crew time is really our limiting factor. Next chart. We've put together, and you may have seen it out at the help desk, 15 different reference guides, ranging from microgravity, plant science, rodent research, et cetera, et cetera. And those are available for you. It kind of gives you a feel for what's available to you as a user on board, what you can expect. And it's just the first step. We ask you, if you're interested in a field, take a look, give it a read, and then if you have some questions or comments or further questions, which I know you will, come talk to us. Next chart. I was asked to talk a little bit about the vision for LEO commercialization and where do we see the space station going. And so our plan is to develop the commercial market. We want to hand over low Earth orbit to the commercial world. And by doing that, what we need to do today on the International Space Station is help enable that movement. Go figure out what you need as a customer on board the International Space Station today. If there's a facility we don't have, tell us. If there's a capability we don't have, tell us. Tell us what you need to enhance the commercialization such that when we move on later in the 2020s, we can have a commercial low Earth orbit and the government can move away. Now that doesn't mean the government's not going to have an interest in low Earth orbit. We will have an interest in low Earth orbit. We're just not looking to be the anchor tenant. And the government's job is to break down barriers and to move on. And low Earth orbit is where we want to go. Cislunar is where we're going to go after low Earth orbit. And you just don't have the money to do both. So our job today is to help that and move the commercial community, do what we can to help the commercial community move so they can operate alone in low Earth orbit or with some little help from the government. Next chart. I think in the interest of time, we'll just go to the next chart. So who are our commercial service providers? Again, we've talked about cargo transportation. We talked about crew transportation. In the cargo world, we just announced a second resupply contract where we've added Sierra Nevada in addition to Orbital and SpaceX, and they'll be flying to the International Space Station and assisting us in our cargo transportation. You see a handful of other digital media, satellite deployers, space biology, et cetera, et cetera. We need to grow this. If our goal is to enhance the commercialization of the low Earth orbit, we need to grow this list and again, double this list or even triple it as you see today. Next chart.
So I look at low Earth orbit as maybe the next new frontier. And so you have some pioneers now. And I think Teledyne Brown Engineering is one of those pioneers where we started back in 2010, really looking at how would you commercialize, the International Space Station. And it's a great, exciting opportunity. And I think that 10 years from now, when we look at it, maybe even 5 years from now, it will be commonplace to go back and forth into space, to go back and forth maybe into the International Space Station or some other orbiting space station. But I think that we've gotten to maybe a tipping point where companies do understand that there is a business case for low Earth orbit and that those things can be done. And given that success of some of the pioneers in this industry, I think it changes everything.
Historically, access to space was limited to companies and corporations which were selected by the government, research selected by the government, and what we lost was the true creativity of so many innovative smaller companies that really didn't understand how to get to space. Everyday companies and everyday researchers and everyday people can think about using the space station. That's a fundamental change that was never allowed before. Having a U.S. national lab in space has allowed for the formation of a wide range of companies. It's creating a new economy. Can we create a sustainable marketplace that has services, commercial products, competition? There's no limit to what we can be doing in a few years.
So those are good words to end on. There's no limit to what we can do in the next few years. So thank you for your time. Like I said, please tell us what you need. We think we're doing better. We know that there's some more work to do. We know we're not finished, but we need your input to tell us, yes, you're working on the things that matter to me most. And I realize that'll be different for everybody, and that's okay. Tell us what you need. Let us help you, and we're going to continue this great space station that we have today, enhance it and make it better and make it easier for you to fly, easier to get your results, easier for you to do what you want to do. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Margaret Clements.
Thank you so much for your expressions of concern, respect, and profound loss for our dear Molly. On behalf of my team at the Center for Knowledge Diffusion, our board of directors, and the community in Bloomington, Indiana that she worked with as we pursued this and other projects, we are profoundly saddened by our shared loss. We are all feeling this pain together. Thank you also for your interest in our work. Before going much further, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation for two of my team members in particular who contributed so much to this project, Michael Stamper and Thomas Smith. Over the last 5 years of my attendance at the ISS Research and Development Conference, there has been a consistent and clarion call for the need to communicate the benefits of research conducted on the International Space Station. When we think of the benefits of the nation's investment in research, especially as it pertains to a project as noble, special, and unique as is the ISS, the road can become very slippery as the benefits are highly intangible, as you well know. Molly and I pursued this research guided by three overarching values. Number one, to evaluate the national mandate given to NASA as it pursues the utilization of the International Space Station. Number two, to evaluate these objectives from an organic perspective. In other words, we examined NASA's research performance from the way they organize their work as a respectful starting point. Number three, we wanted to be perceptive of normally invisible transactions and paradigms. We felt that to evaluate the nation's mandate, we must first grapple with the very concept of scientific gain. There are many interpretations of scientific gain. From the beginning, Molly was quite taken by the definition given by Walid Abdelati, who was the NASA chief scientist in 2011, who defined science as new knowledge. She was quite taken with the concept of delta K over K. In other words, new knowledge that incorporates incremental advances and failures. At the beginning of this project and throughout, Molly and I spent many nights on the telephone into the wee hours of the morning, imagining and discussing the challenges of our objective in this case. Breakthroughs in innovation are often demonstrated by the issuance of patents, licenses, adoption, and use of commercialization activities. And science has the goal of tinkering toward new understanding by the creation of new knowledge and the publication of new peer-reviewed articles. Those involved with research and science share common challenges with corporate research and development labs at universities and in government. And that is, how do we measure and count new knowledge? How do we characterize its significance for the agency or corporate shareholders or promotion and tenure review boards or funders? And how do we describe it for society so that they can believe and continue to support our objectives? How best to use this information to encourage new science and innovation and manage internal resources as science managers and leaders? And how, what, by whom, and why to communicate credibly to diverse stakeholders and in turn their constituencies. Among its many missions, the ISS has a special mandate to further scientific discoveries. Molly prepared this slide to show how central scientific discoveries are to the mission of the ISS. You can see that she circled scientific, future objectives, support human space exploration, ensure that the management of the ISS National Laboratory results in scientific research, support 3 activities: scientific research, technology development, and the development of industrial applications. So we were advised when we were moving forward that we should take these missions as a very central point and vantage point from our research. And there was also another part of the mission of the ISS Program Science Office that was to contribute to the peer-reviewed research base in physics and the life sciences and related technologies on the ISS, and to utilize the enormous and unique facility that is the ISS and deliver critical benefits, all the while incorporating diverse disciplines in the advancement of knowledge. So Erwin Feller, who served on the National Science Board and the National Space Board before, encouraged us to utilize Pasteurs Quadrant as an evaluative framework in analyzing advances made in science through the ISS. And we believed that no organization or no national laboratory or no research unit in our country or in the world really embodies so well the tension, the delicate tension between basic research, new knowledge, and applied research. And that's the Pasteurs Quadrant that we have utilized in organizing our framework. Smartphones, GPS, and energy-efficient lighting are just a few of the innovations that originally came from work that was often purely theoretical. So how we move science forward to make useful applications to improve the life of humans is really what we must struggle to advance. Over the last decade, there's been a significant and growing community of scholars in the Office of Science and Technology Policy that have formulated what they call a federal science of science policy. That is the approach that we incorporated in our research when we set about analyzing the impact of science conducted on the International Space Station. Policymakers have long been interested in access to better quantitative data, qualitative information, theory, and models to guide decisions about investments in scientific research and development. And they also have been interested in the efforts to quantify and promote the scientific workforce training and encourage innovation and entrepreneurship. At the same time, researchers from many disciplines across the social and behavioral and natural sciences have sought to understand factors that influence and prevent scientific discovery. All of these national initiatives exist to enable government program managers, specialized users, policy analysts, and the general public to access information in new ways to understand social and structural dynamics and to discover new opportunities. So on this project, Molly and I worked to map knowledge flows from research conducted on the International Space Station. By doing so, we used multiple methods to analyze a data set curated by the ISS Research Office. When we started this project, the ISS had only been recently completed. As such, the scientists had not yet had sufficient time to harness the full potential of the ISS as a research laboratory. We also believed that the ISS represented such a unique research environment that comparisons to other research laboratories and research outputs would be problematic. We initially aspired to employ the STAR metrics approach that is embraced by the Federal Science of Science Policy group in Washington, D.C. and beyond that analyze data at the individual scientist level. And we embarked on employing that STAR metrics approach. And some of our first analyses looked at evolving scientific teams of exceptional researchers, and Tara Rutley at the ISS office. She was able to give a TEDx presentation about evolving networks of scientific impact involving knowledge diffusion from co-author networks from research conducted on the ISS. And this is just one of the initial forays that we made as we embarked on this research that tried to grapple with and communicate the impact of science conducted on the International Space Station. Here is another photograph of a large display that we thought would be and could be turned into an interactive device that showed how the ISS experience changed the research trajectories and the connectivity of critical researchers in their scientific careers. The dark lines in those photos are the years in which the scientists participated in ISS research, and their collaboration network grew exponentially after their involvement with the NASA Program Science Office. We didn't think that that was an accident. We think that the people, the good people working at Johnson Space Center had everything to do with making that come about, that there were knowledgeable teams who had their fingers on the pulse of the scientific community, who could bring diverse points of view together to make something special happen. And this was our attempt to illustrate that at the individual level. But that being said, because that was such a big endeavor, we also thought that we should focus on one of the very fundamental missions of NASA to promote disciplinary impact and to promote scientific achievements in the disciplines, and to analyze that using the peer-reviewed research, because that was more central to the mission of NASA's ISS program than the initial route that we took on our research. So we went from analyzing research at the individual level to look at research products such as articles, reports, and citations to them to communicate the disciplinary flow of knowledge and the impact that science on the ISS has had to the broader scientific community. And the reason we did that was because grant agencies, administrators, R&D managers need to monitor their grant flows, their research and development funds, their funding strategies and patterns to identify scientific frontiers, the dynamics of scientific fields, and to recognize emerging complementary fields. Researchers and students also need to detect social networks in order to become part of a growing segment of an important invisible college in which they hope to achieve their aspirations and their quest for knowledge. Industry, the national security agencies need to have this approach in order to identify major scientific results and commercial opportunities. So what we did was we started, again, as I said before, with the research outputs that the ISS Program Office had been stewarding. And this is in terms of scientific research articles in 4 program areas. And we began with 888 records that were directly attributed by the Johnson Space Center as having been an output and an outcome of science conducted on the International Space Station. And we began thinking that in science, knowledge spreads in many ways. Among the most prevalent ways in which knowledge travels is when knowledge and ideas flow between individuals working together on scientific research projects, when thoughts are shared between team members who make breakthroughs and advances while they're developing technologies, and when knowledge is shared and defended through the rigorous process of critical peer review. And that last point, this critical peer review, is what we have utilized when we portray the knowledge flows over the context of science itself. This map that you see before you on the slide is It was actually developed primarily here at the University of California, San Diego. It's called the UCSD Map of Science, and it uses the universe of research articles and journal sets published by Thomson Reuters. There are over 25,000 journals that Thomson Reuters and Scopus carries, and inside each of those journals, and included in this analysis and this backbone of science, are millions of research articles. There was a force-directed layout algorithm that was overlaid onto a Mercator profile, and the actual shape of the base map of science looks as though it's a living organism. And it also resembles a geographic space. And on that geographic space, you can see that there are 13 primary disciplines that are categorized by Thomson Reuters and the UCSD Map of Science. And we wanted to take this base map and lay over it the accomplishments of research conducted on the ISS using peer-reviewed journal articles as a starting point. This particular slide is the knowledge flow from those 888 original ISS research articles and all of the research articles that cite the original ISS research. Amazingly, over 3,700 articles cite those 888 originating ISS articles, and we found that to be particularly amazing because the articles were relatively new. And yet, despite the newness of the articles, they had already had a broad and intensive impact across all 13 possible disciplines from just 4 NASA program areas on which they conduct research on the ISS. And of the 544 possible subdisciplines contained on this map, in these 4 program areas, NASA had impacted over 277 of the subdisciplines. So we look upon this map and as a sort of ISS utilization. We think that this is a profound way that ISS research is being utilized by the broader scientific community. Now, when we began this first analysis using the UCSD Map of Science, interestingly, the layout algorithm developed by the University of California, San Diego only accounted for 60% of the ISS research articles and those that cite them. And we find this interesting because we think that it is an indicator that there's some groundbreaking research that is occurring because of the research conducted in microgravity. So we resolved that conflict, and we were able to map the remaining 40% of the articles so that they are included in what we would call the universe of science published by Thomson Reuters. So just for curiosity and for illustration and how this map can be used as a benchmark, I'm going to proceed through the next set of slides showing you all 4 of the program areas individually, because when we look at these program areas and how they lay over the disciplinary spectrum, I think that it's possible to perceive new opportunities for research. So human research utilization, you can see that there are some obvious emphasis having to do with the outputs of research utilization from the space station on human research. So medical sciences, for instance, is impacted. But also interesting is that chemical sciences is impacted, and that all 13 of the possible disciplines are impacted and many subdisciplines from the research conducted on the International Space Station. And here, I've just given an indication of some of the research subdisciplines that have been utilized most in human research. And you can see this, this bar chart more closely on our website at the Center for Knowledge Diffusion. Here's biology and biotechnology utilization. And you can see how the map kind of moves and slides over the different disciplinary and subdisciplinary emphasis. Again, these bar charts show the top 10 subdisciplines utilized by ISS research. Physical sciences is concentrated on the left end of the spectrum, and it seems as though there could be opportunity more toward the right end, especially as devices are made with new materials used by health professionals. We think that there are some inherent opportunities that one can see immediately by looking at this research map, and then to explore why is nothing being done in the health professional sciences using physical sciences research from the ISS. And there could be good answers, but there could also be good opportunities inherent within this map. Here's Earth and space science utilization, which is an interesting view because Earth and space science has so many other products that come out of the program office at NASA that don't include peer-reviewed publications. You know, the remote sensing, satellite pictures, and all of the different products that they have come up with in their work. It shows, nevertheless, that Earth and space science utilization in the peer-reviewed literature is still quite strong and has had an impact across many subdisciplines. Initially, I thought I would go into some of the individual benefits of what has been achieved on the International Space Station, but I think over these last few days we've heard from the people actually doing the research themselves, you know, what has been advanced in osteoporosis research, in telemedicine, in macular degeneration, in polymer research, and all of these other fields, that it would be an abstraction for me to go into that level of detail, except to tell you that what they have described here at the meeting leading up to this is reflected in the impact that I'm able to illustrate here. And to just look at this bar chart and to see how Earth and space science is utilized across all these subdisciplines, it's really, I think, a thing of beauty, especially considering that about 85% of the program area's work is in other areas that don't include peer-reviewed research. And when taken together, these maps side by side can show where the maps are lit up, where they're dark, where they could be illustrated through new discovery, where new discovery is illustrated surprisingly, and I think that that is a good benchmark that also has quantitative meaning. Through this research, we also kind of dabbled and tinkered with other forms of evaluation. This particular chord diagram is an illustration of how NASA organizes their work through investigations. And the red chord connecting biotechnology and math and physics, for instance, is that tie is connected by the investigations on the right. And you can see that all of the disciplines are connected to each other. And I think that from an organizational perspective, that this is a huge achievement, and it shows something of efficiency from NASA's design and implementation of their mission as they launch the investigations into space. I'm going to go now to our key findings, that science of science policy is a type of science analysis and assessment, and it's a key federal initiative led by the Office of Science and Technology Policy, the Office of Management and Budget, the White House, and the National Science Foundation, with the participation of the science-oriented agencies. The science of science approaches seek to go beyond mere counts of publications or outputs to ascertain and demonstrate delta K over K. That is, the generation and diffusion of new knowledge through networks of people and their formal and informal exchanges of ideas. Salient attributes of our research approach are that it is objective and external to the syntheses prepared by the agency. That ISS science, in particular, as inventoried and curated by the ISS Science Office, can be described by the science of science approach, that is, methods, analytical studies, and visual displays of results for use by decision makers and to help them inform the science community as well as the interested public. Using the science of science assessment, the ISS science portfolio is extraordinarily impressive in breadth. The range of science disciplines and the impact and growth and rates of growth in citations to ISS research, both within specialized space journals, evidence the diffusion of specialized knowledge to benefit space activities. In mainstream non-space journals, evidence of the diffusion of knowledge for broader societal benefit is apparent too. The salient attributes of our approach are that it is objective and external to the syntheses prepared by the agency, and that they can be applied to an independent benchmark on which NASA and the ISS Program Office perform well. Our future work is to include all of the NASA program areas in the ISS Map of Science and to update to a live status this work so that the public and decision makers and scientists can have easier access to the opportunities and the findings that are inherent within this map. And we want to convert this to an interactive touchscreen capability and connect researchers and research to patents. Now, I'd like to end this with just something personal. I have been now to all 5 of the ISS Research and Development Conferences. This one, the 5th, has almost everything here. You have science, engineering, math, art, social sciences, all 13 primary discipline classifications represented, analyzed, and visualized, but we have not yet had a poem. As your resident English major, I plan to correct that omission with the following poem written by Anne Haynes, a friend with whom I used to dissect frogs in the 7th grade. It somehow captures the mystery and the wonder of twisting the kaleidoscope to envision things in new ways. And this was something that Molly, in particular, was wont to do. The poem is entitled Let X Equal by Anne Haynes. Let the woman wake from sleep as she does each morning of her life. Let her arm reach out drowsy and brush the bedroom curtains aside. Let her watch for 5 whole minutes the cat washing herself on the front lawn, the bird pecking madly at damp earth, the neighbor clutching the front of her robe as she steps out the door and stoops for her morning paper. Let the sunlight be quiet and warm across the lawn. Let the grass be succulent and green. Let the day unfold like a perfect equation, every moment growing toward some simple answer, some singular integer. Let the woman stand for the thesis, the given, all the formulas that build a body of knowledge. Let her waking be the question and the window, equal some visible understanding, the work she is asked to show. Let the neighbor and the curtains be variables, the light and the lawn be the sum of each other, the pure reciprocity of morning. Let the woman's hand opening curtains and the woman rising be a new theorem, solid and given, the beginning of an elegant and irrefutable proof. Let X equal. And so even in her death, may Molly's hand always be in our work, leading us to never-ending, elegant, and irrefutable proofs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret. Your work and Molly's work and your colleagues' work is, it shows what we've hoped to see, that we're making changes and doing things on board the International Space Station that affects people all over the globe. So once again, thank you very much. So I think we have a few minutes for questions, or we don't have a few minutes for questions. Apparently Sam thinks he has a few minutes for questions. So I guess maybe one question.
Joel, my name is Brian Barnett with Solstar. And so I wanted to, you had that one chart where you said list of commercial services on the space station. So I wanted to let you know in a few years you can add another service, which is commercial internet service. So
Excellent. Well, that list needs to grow. You know, like I said, it's a sign of our success is that list, and the other lists that I had in the presentation continue to grow. So, thank you.
thank you.
This is Sam Shamimi, the director for Space Station at NASA headquarters. I find this work fascinating, Margaret, and very powerful. I was wondering, in the map you showed all the positive connections, if you will. Is it possible on the map to show the negative where there should be connections or could be connections, but there are not showing up? Is that possible as well?
That would ultimately be possible. Is this on?
No.
That would ultimately be possible, but I think that where the map is not lit up is an example of how opportunities could be pursued. But to utilize negative research, which would be important, very important to this line of research, it would take another classification system just in order to find the negative research.
Yeah, and, you know, in my world, I deal with a lot of policy, so all the positive things are good, but where's the growth potential is also worth highlighting as well.
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, everyone, for your time. If we don't stop now, Margaret and I won't be invited back. So, however, if you have questions for either of us, please don't hesitate. Again, from the International Space Station, we think we're making it easier for you to do what you need to do. We're thinking we're giving you a platform that's world-class, that affects the people, everybody that you see and talk to on a daily basis. If we're not doing that, we need to hear from you. So again, thank you very much. Thank you to Margaret. Thank you to Molly. Thank you.